You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, Radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in this show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
Welcome to that favorite time of the day on Tuesdays for you. I know it's the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is D. I'm here with Chris and V, and we are going to be talking about all things interesting from a non-superstitious point of view. So thank you for joining us. Well, we've got a couple topics we wanted to delve in tonight. Possibly abortion. We'll see how it goes. But we definitely want to talk about the vice presidential debate that occurred last night. And I only was able to see part of it. V, did you see the whole thing?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
What about you, Chris? Did you see the whole thing too?
Yeah, I saw the whole thing.
Okay, great. So you can fill me in any holes. So I don't know, what was your general gist of the debate? Anybody?
Let me just throw in something before we go on to that. I just want to, kind of remind everyone that this is a podcast and we recorded about a week ahead of time.
Sure.
So unfortunately, the analysis that people are hearing right now is about a week old. So, just FYI,
yeah, good point.
It's not a live show that, that's why we're about a week behind on these topics that are more timely, I guess I want to say.
That's all right. What we have to say is so interesting. Time is not an issue for it, I'm sure, right?
Oh, of course. We have some deep analysis. We've prepared for hours and hours for this. We've read every analysis out there, and
so what little of the debate that I saw, and I saw maybe 15 minutes of it, unfortunately, was that it was like, boy, it was a cat fight. They were really going at each other. Did it stay like that the whole time?
It was like that from beginning to end, pretty much.
Really?
I mean, those guys were at each other's throats, and they did not let go from start to finish.
Yeah, and I got the impression that it was Kane who was kind of really going after Pence. And, Pence was doing a good job of deflecting it and kind of trying to make Kane look stupid.
They both did. They both interrupted each other quite a bit. And Pence went after Hillary and Kane went after the Donald. And, it was a brawl. It was a brawl.
Wow. Boy. So did it change anybody's opinion on who they're going to vote for?
Didn't really change mine.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, well, I think in the for the most part, though, I mean, these vice presidential debates are just an opportunity for the campaigns to hit the other guy, without the main candidate embarrassing themselves or something like that. And they rarely change anyone's opinion. I mean.
Well, it is interesting to note, too, that we are having two of the oldest people I've heard running for president from the two parties. So, I mean, the idea of somebody getting ill in the 4-year term is definitely more likely than, I would say significantly so, than when Barack Obama got elected.
Oh, yeah.
So we could have one of these people as the president. That's even scarier. This makes this election even scarier.
Mm-hmm. Well, one interesting statistic that I found that may be interesting to people is the number of vice presidents that have become president in the United States is 14, and
wow.
8 of these were because of a death of the sitting president.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's what, 20% almost of presidents?
Yeah. I mean, something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that
it's
sounds
not
like
a small number.
Sounds like we're about due for one.
Well, if we keep electing these old candidates, it's bound to happen sooner or later.
True.
Not that I wish it on any of the candidates, even if it is Donald Trump, but he's a pretty old guy, seems to be healthy, but you never know.
So was there any particular topics that you guys found to be interesting that they covered?
Man, they were all over the map, really. I mean, they went from economics to foreign policy to abortion. I mean, they went through all of it.
Interesting.
One thing that really struck me, though, was, Mike Pence. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by it. As usual, he was very good at dodging questions. We've seen that before when, for example, with RIFRA a while back, and, when he was in George Stephanopoulos, he kept getting asked questions and he answered whatever he wanted to answer. He did not care what he was being asked.
Right.
To the point where in the debates last night, he was asked a question about North Korea and he started talking about the Clinton Foundation. I don't know how you make that leap, but he managed.
Well, I don't know. That's why I thought he was a perfect running mate for Trump, just because Trump is also kind of skilled in that same area. When asked about how Hillary fits into the presidential look, he kept deflecting and talking about her stamina. And he was asked the same question 3 times, and at no point did he answer the presidential look. And yet I saw articles online about how the moderator was terrible and never let him answer that question, and how Hillary just kind of went on and talked about how she has, the skills and qualifications to be president regardless. And it's just like, you realize that Trump at no point said anything about presidential look. And yeah, I saw the same behavior in Pence, to where, just like you were saying, to where he would not answer the question. Or if he would answer the question, he tended to answer the question in a very vague way.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also kind of akin to Trump, to where he's like, I've got a plan. And nothing about the plan.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, it's a secret plan. They don't want to let the enemy know about the plan.
Right.
And that Hillary Clinton, telling the enemy what she's going to do.
Yeah, it was in the hidden emails that they brought up at least 20 times during the debate.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't even believe how many times that crap was brought up.
Yeah.
It's just kills me.
There's ways to hit another candidate, and then there's legit ways, and then there's the ways that, Pence tried and stuff. I don't know.
Because when Pence would bring up the emails, it's like, well, okay, that's all right. That was settled. There was no crime committed, and we're past that. Now we're to the present, and I hate how many times he brought it up, but at least with Kane, he did legitimately bring up the point that Trump hasn't released his tax return stuff. And although I really don't think a whole lot of useful information can come from that, but it's still a point that is something in the present that can be dealt with now. And it's not being dealt with.
Yeah,
being deflected.
Yeah, every president since Nixon, I think, has released their tax returns, and they're not. In this case, the Democrats are pushing because they're pretty sure that he hasn't paid any taxes, and they want to hit him with that. The fact that everybody else is paying taxes, paying their share, and he's not. They want to make that kind of argument, and that's why they're bringing that up. Of course, Trump being Trump, he's just not going to do it. He's not. He knows what's going to happen. He knows that he's just going to get hit with it. He's going to gain nothing politically from releasing those tax returns. So it's very doubtful that he will ever release his tax returns. I don't see it.
I just thought it was very interesting during the talk how each side, just was unbelievable to me. I'd never even heard half this stuff, but how each side was accusing the other of having relations with Russia. How Hillary has these relations with Russia and how Trump has business dealings with Russia. And it's just like, oh my gosh, they were just constantly at it in every single avenue. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I know, Russia is kind of an adversary, but like, they're by no means the worst people that we should fear. I think there's worse players out there that, we should address far more in our foreign policy as opposed to Russia.
Yeah, I stopped being worried about Russia about 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the nuclear thing with Russia, it's never going to happen. We're never going to be in a nuclear war with Russia. I don't care who is at the helm. They're not nuts. They are not going to start a nuclear war.
I've been putting myself in that scenario quite a bit here, actually, for the last couple of days. Not me, but thinking about that scenario. Like, what if there is a standoff? Like, they're talking about this stuff in Syria, no-fly zones. Like, what if we do something that Russia decides is not acceptable? You have this standoff, and somebody's got to concede. And let's just say it goes all the way up to, like, nuclear threat of a nuclear war. Who the hell do you want with their finger on the button?
Dude, that was one thing that I thought was great about that vice presidential debate, because they actually started to show the underlying danger in voting for Pence and Trump. Because Pence was straight up, and he was like, we have to use a broad-shouldered approach. We have to show America's strength. And all I'm hearing is that we need to bully ourselves on the entire world.
War.
And start a freaking war. And that was something I thought was great for Kane to bring up, because Kane brought up the whole notion of Trump and Pence, that the more nuclear weapons we have around, the better we are. And that's just, I don't think that's very smart. As much as I hate to be a naysayer, I don't see more countries having nuclear technology as being an advantage.
I mean, I'm much more worried about North Korea's nukes than I am about the Russian nukes.
Well, that's because North Korea has multiple times tested its missile technology in order to try to accomplish the goal of getting an intercontinental ballistic missile all the way to the U.S. Yeah. They've done that. So I think that if somebody is test firing something, and the only way that they would have a need to do that particular type of weapon is if they were aiming it at us, that's a little scary.
And the crazy thing is that they've developed that under the heaviest of sanctions. I mean, I don't think there's another country today that has that kind of heavy sanctions. Nothing almost can be exported there. Money is very hard to flow in and out of the country. Exchanging currency, things like that, is incredibly difficult. And yet they have still managed through, I don't even understand how, but they've managed to develop nuclear technology despite all the efforts of the entire world to prevent that. And I mean, not even China likes that idea, I'm pretty sure. And but they have managed.
Yeah.
And that scares me. Because those kind of dictatorships and stuff like that, when pressed in the corner, will do something stupid like that.
Yeah. Well, that's why, an actual nuclear war with Russia seems so unlikely, but it's the rogue state that isn't a part of, like, civilization or doesn't like it. That scares me for sure. But boy, I still think Trump, I just don't know, man. Is he the type of man who could back down? And
I don't know.
Like, if he did something stupid. I don't think that's in his
vocabulary. Yeah.
See,
right. It's not.
Well, I couldn't vote for him just on that alone.
I really think some of that, after my wife told me this, it really does make a lot more sense. With Trump growing up in the environment that there are two ways to live your life: to either be a winner or a loser. Mm-hmm. There is no prize for second place. There is no honor in not winning.
That is how he grew up. Yep.
It's scary.
Yeah. I watched that Frontline
Oh
the
yeah,
choice.
yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
I really enjoyed it. The first 5 minutes was like, oh my gosh, where
Yeah.
Trump gets invited to the what was it, correspondence dinner, I believe.
Yep. Oh, he got
And
roasted pretty
yeah,
good.
Obama roasted Trump, and you could just see like Trump's reaction, and you can imagine a man like that choosing at that time to be like, I'm going to be the president and show this
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
and just fit too well for him, and like that's not the motivation I want in a person striving for the White House.
Yep.
So
I mean,
yeah, but
so guys, we talked about nukes a little bit, and I mean, we've already had a case where the U.S. was faced with nuclear war. Back in the '60s when Kennedy was president, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and when the Soviet Union was trying to deliver nukes to Cuba, and there is ways to handle it. I mean, So, the U.S. has been at the brink of, nuclear war with previously with the Cuban Missile Crisis in the '60s when Kennedy was president. And if you try to compare Kennedy to Donald Trump, for example, I mean, I can't see the same outcome happening. Kennedy was able to show force, was able to use diplomacy, was able to use all kinds of different ways to prevent those missiles from reaching Cuba. When the Soviet Union at the time was a lot bigger threat than Russia is today. There was a whole block, kind of the equivalent of NATO of the East, the Soviet Union and all the other communist states. It was called the Warsaw Pact at the time. So as a bloc, they were about on par with NATO, and maybe slightly behind. But today, Russia is a lot, on its own, is absolutely no match for NATO. Although you still wouldn't want to, launch some kind of war with NATO. So, but the point is that when faced with nuclear war and things like that, there's a right way and a wrong way to handle things. And, I certainly don't think that, the Donald can make the compromises and take the decisions to do what's necessary to prevent it. I feel like he'll just beat his chest and, start potentially a nuclear war because he just doesn't have it in him to back down where needed, to make a deal, to make a compromise, to use our allies properly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was just saying, in situations like that where you have a hair trigger, it's not advantageous to have a knee-jerk reflex, and I see Trump do a lot of knee-jerk reflexes. Now, granted, during the first actual presidential debate, there were a couple times where Hillary did a knee-jerk reflex, but for the most part, she really did try to maintain her composure. I don't know if I saw that type of control behind Trump at any point during that particular debate.
And even if he did control himself, it was at the expense of everything that he has. And it's one thing to be provoked on stage when you're just talking to some people.
Yeah.
It's another thing when like the fate of the planet is in your hands.
Exactly.
Go figure.
He looks like a very likely candidate for the F it moment.
Yeah, right.
F it button, click, F it.
Yeah.
It was a good time. And I have to say, because we're broadcasting in a part of the country that's probably going to lean toward Trump. I really, really looked at him as a serious possibility. I was like, okay, he could shake things up. Like, I like the idea of shaking things up. And so I was like, well, maybe he's just the only person who could get up there far enough because of who he is, to do the shakeup. And I really gave that a lot of thought as like a possible reason to vote for him. Some of the stuff we're talking about now is throwing me over the top, that you cannot vote for this man, I think, in good conscience because of the potential risks. It just seems so obvious to me. And I have to add to this too. I feel like I'm choosing between someone who's going to murder me, Trump, and somebody who's going to maim me. That's what I feel like I'm making a choice between those two aggressors, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that some days. I mean, in all honesty, I like the idea of someone running for president that isn't a politician.
Yeah.
That hasn't been a politician their entire life. That, as an outsider is going to have a little bit of a different perspective. Maybe a businessman that's grown some businesses. We have some good ones out there. I mean, if Elon Musk ran for president, like, I don't know what his political views are, I would vote for him in a heartbeat, just because I know the things that he has achieved, the companies that he has built, all that's impressive. That's impressive. Where Donald Trump, started with a giant loan, and, there's some suggestions that his businesses didn't even keep up with the general market trends.
Yeah. Well, he basically built his name, and his name became famous because of his humongous ego. And he just promoted this virtuous circle of being a bigger douchebag and be getting more famous for it.
I just need to start up Rex Industries, and then I'll be good to go.
You know what? That does have a very interesting zing to the name. I mean, that is a good name.
It should be.
I would invest in that company just based on the name.
There you go. And then, next
with the first name starts with E.
Next presidential cycle, I can end up being the youngest president ever. So there you go. I have my business plan.
That is actually something interesting I would like to take a look at, is who was the youngest president that we've ever elected?
I actually just looked Kennedy. It up. It was John Kennedy. Yeah.
Oh, was it Kennedy?
Yeah, 43.
Okay. Interesting. Wow, he was that young. That is crazy.
It seems really young the older you get to that age, or the closer you get to that age.
But I mean, there's something to be said about, electing someone that is younger. I mean, they may not have all the experience. They may not have, some of the things that come with age, but, they're closer, I believe, to being in touch with the general public I agree. At a younger age.
And just think how fast things are changing now, too,
Oh, for sure.
Sure, Trump emails and all that stuff, but, there's a lot of people his age that don't use the computer at all, have no idea or no interest in getting a cell phone that takes pictures or anything like that. So that's a huge gap in the generations.
But my wife and I were just talking about this last night during the debates. But I don't know if I necessarily need somebody who has had decades of experience in politics, or I kind of don't care about the past so much about some of these candidates. I really care about how, like you said, how in touch they are, and how they seem to be willing to be the definition of a public servant and to serve the public, as opposed to just tyrant kind of behavior that we see with Trump, where he just lords over everyone and makes everyone do whatever he wants to do. I don't see much negotiating or discussion involved with him or Pence, for that matter, which I thought was great. I mean, I know this kind of leads into the other topic, but when it talked, they actually asked the question to both candidates: do you let your religious beliefs tie into the kinds of legislation that you do, or the way that you uphold the law in your respective states? And Kane gave a great answer. He's like, you know what? Being a religious man, I don't necessarily support the death penalty. But you know what? There were a number of times in my state I had to uphold it because that was the law of the land, and they did some pretty heinous stuff. So you know what? Yes, I did sentence some people to death, and that goes against my beliefs. Whereas the same question posed to Pence was a very different scenario.
Oh, yes.
He actually never really answered the question. Instead, he pretty much talked about how awesome some of the legislation that he has supported and signed, or at least attempted, how awesome that is at preserving life, because life is precious.
Yes.
So he literally just admitted that he lords over the state and tries to get the state to do what aligns with his religious beliefs.
Sure.
Yeah, very different perspectives. Very different perspectives. I wondered something on Kane, and maybe you guys know. Could he have, let's say there was someone that was on death row. Were his options a complete pardon, or could he just say, okay, let's change the death sentence to like life in prison? That I wonder if governors, how limited they are on that kind of power.
I don't know. I was thinking that they could do a full pardon.
Well, I would imagine they could, but let's say, because this is the example that I was thinking of. Let's say someone is in jail because they killed someone else, and for that they are on death row. But let's say your personal convictions don't agree with the death penalty. So, but you also don't want to release that person because he committed a crime and they should stay in jail. Could you do like a partial pardon?
I have no idea.
That'd be
I'd have to spend some time, looking up that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. That, I mean, Pence is known for his religious beliefs here in Indiana, so of course he's going to push that on the federal level, and that's a little scary to think about.
Yeah.
And one of the sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was just saying one of the things I brought up in my talk yesterday was that in a 3-year time span between 2011 and 2013, there was more abortion type bills being passed in states than in the previous 10 years combined. So more types of legislation being passed to limit women's rights in that 3-year span than the entire previous 10 years.
Well, this abortion topic is, it's so sensitive. I can see how people are so passionate about it from so many different angles.
Yeah, it's definitely a gray area. I hope people don't take it as too much of a black or white thing.
Yeah, it sure is.
But that was really the point of my talk was not necessarily to get at much of the morals or ethics, because that's what a lot of this is. A lot of this is philosophy, but unfortunately there's a whole lot of philosophy that's attempted before getting at the facts first. And you really need to have that foundation of facts before you can delve into philosophy.
Sure.
You have to understand that the earth revolves around the sun before you can start philosophizing beyond about the structure of the solar system.
My facts are spiritual, man. The spiritual facts is what I go by. But yeah, that's a great point. So, I mean, Hillary's the obvious choice, I think, in that scenario. You'd want something to be somebody who's going to be more secular, so everybody's included in the conversation or in the policy that comes up.
Yeah, you definitely have to, in pretty much any topic, but especially when you're talking about abortion, you have to bring science into it. When you're talking about all, more different topics, you can't. But in this case, you can bring biology into it. And, Mike Pence is basically a creationist as far as I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And, so he obviously doesn't believe in evolution. He doesn't understand biology, or pretends not to for political gains, which I'm actually willing to believe that that is the case. So, when you disregard the whole science surrounding the issue, how can you make an educated, decision? You're supposed to lead an entire state. You're top dog in your state, and you disregard all the relevant information for how you feel about an issue.
Yeah.
Well, did you hear some of the things that he was saying about this anti-coal movement or something like that? Do you remember
He
something
did
about that?
mention
No.
something, but I
No.
don't remember exactly what he said.
Yeah, like he mentioned it a couple times during the debate. I'm not even entirely sure what he was trying to get at, but I think he seems to be of this opinion that global warming is a hoax and that really all this is an anti-fossil fuel movement to drive all these big oil and big coal people out of business. That's kind of what he seemed to be hinting at.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's true for both of them to some extent, Trump and Pence. But is anybody like questioning democracy in general with this election? I mean, is this real? I mean, the world is so complex. Like, how can this be the process by which that we pick the most qualified person? That's really startling because I feel like they're really inferior on both sides to what would be ideal. Now, I guess that's just me speaking. I guess some people look at Trump and they're like, he is the ideal candidate. But boy, I just have a hard time seeing that many people buying into him that much.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does anybody? I mean, this is a totally crazy, kind of idea to bring up. But like, is anybody questioning like, how are we going to do this in the future? Is this the way it's going to be as technology gets better and things get crazier?
Well, as long as we have the two-party system, it kind of seems like we're stuck with that. I mean, it's very difficult the way the system is set up for a third-party candidate to get anywhere. And what's the libertarian guy's name? Johnson, was it?
Yeah,
Gary Johnson.
Yeah, Gary Johnson. I mean, he seems to be polling at about 7%, which is not insignificant. But I think that's about as good as those third-party candidates have done for many, many years.
And they always poll higher than the actual turnout is. Like, Gary Johnson may get 1 or 2% of the vote.
Yeah.
I think it's really low. So yeah, it's really kind of a joke watching the third parties attempt it. I mean, I'm glad they're there, and I'm hoping it's kind of like nice to have a backdoor just in case it gets really bad. Like, let's say Hillary dropped out or something like that, and all of a sudden these third-party candidates would be like right up in the running.
Well, let me just give you an example of my home country. I mean, the whole country, is the size of Indiana, so it's not as complex to do it because here you have to worry about the interest of 50 different states being equally represented and fairly and all that. But there, there's a single chamber parliament. There's not a Senate and a House of Representatives. It's basically all like a House of Representatives, and the president is elected by a popular vote. There's no electoral college. There's none of that. And any party that has over 4% of the vote is represented in Parliament, and they will nominate the candidate for president. And even parties that are not in Parliament, I believe, can nominate someone for president. And they're all on the ballot. And usually when they have debates, there's more than just the two leading candidates in the debates. There's candidates from the other parties. I'm not sure what the criteria is for that, actually, but at least they're represented in the debates. And when you have multiple candidates, it's not unusual to have 4, 5, 6 people running for president. And if no one wins more than half of the vote, which has happened, there's a second round of elections where the top two candidates run against each other, and there's a second round of voting because you just don't know how to add up all the votes, it becomes very complex. Would people that voted for candidate 3, 4, and 5 would have voted for candidate 1 or candidate 2? So it's kind of convoluted, but
I really like it though. I really like that idea. I think that would provide a government that's more representative of the people in general.
Well, just wait about 12 years. Get about 3 presidential cycles here, and the next round of presidential elections will be held on Facebook. Yeah. You just hit like or dislike for each of the candidates, and there you go. Popular vote.
Well, honestly, that stuff has to happen too.
It will happen. I imagine it will be that way eventually.
Yeah. There's no reason why we should have to go to a special polling place or any of that. All we should have to do is, put our thumbprint on our phone. They all, can scan your prints, and you type in a couple of secret passwords that you apply for or something like that, and off you go. And that's a good way to bring more people into the election, because our election turnouts are so horrible. It's been below 50% of the eligible voters to vote. That's, is that really representative of the mood of the entire country? I always wonder why people don't vote more. Are they do they think their vote doesn't count? Do they not like any of the candidates, so they don't want to vote for anyone?
Well, some people work, or they. I remember one year not voting like 8 years ago, and to be honest with you, it just kind of slipped my mind. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, like, really, my vote's only, like, in the presidential election, is only worth 1/100 millionth of the total. And that's how I justified it in my head at the time.
Another thing that I was going to mention, why don't we have voting on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, when more people are off work? Why are elections on like a Tuesday when everybody has to be at work and they may not be able to, go and vote? And, you end up with these giant lines when people go there at 5:00, and, some people are going to wait. And, the polls are going to stay open until everyone votes, but a lot of people are just going to leave. You got to go pick up the kids. You got to go cook dinner. You got to go do this and that. If you can't go in and out in 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, you're going to discourage a lot of people.
Yeah. I would imagine this is coming, 20 years down the road? That might be too quick. I don't know. Things are changing pretty fast, but that makes total sense to me. We should definitely have it on our phones. Yeah. I don't know why we're still doing it this old prehistoric way. I know.
Yeah, the voting machines that we currently have, at least the ones that I've seen here in Fort Wayne, are ancient. Those things are beasts.
Yeah, they're huge.
They're going to be obsolete. That stuff is going to start breaking, and we're going to have to replace all those voting machines one way or another here within the next 5-10 years max. And they're hugely expensive too, as far as I'm aware of. Why can't we just have an iPad there that you use to vote? With a nice app, and as long as it's not connected to the outside network, it's perfectly secure. You vote, and that's it. It's simple to use. It keeps up with technology. It's adaptable.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely coming, but I want to bring it back to the abortion topic.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Chris, you just did a presentation on this. Was there any points that in your presentation that you feel are relevant to like what was discussed at the debate regarding it?
Kindly enough, funny enough, I should say. So I gave this presentation at IPFW yesterday, 6 to 7 p.m., I believe. And I guess the whole point of my talk was to just kind of fill in a lot of the gaps that weren't filled in by the Planned Parenthood talk a couple months ago or whenever that was. Because a lot of people left that talk very dissatisfied because they really didn't learn much from that talk. And it really was kind of just Planned Parenthood trying to assert that they're not evil and trying to assert that they do a whole lot of stuff that's not abortion. You know, most of their business and activity is centered around many other services that they have to offer. And that abortion's only a very, very, very small percentage in the single digits of what they do. And yet that's what they're judged on.
Right.
And that's an important point. I agree. It's just they really didn't talk about any details about abortion.
Like the biology of it? Or?
Yeah, they didn't talk about anything virtually. So I broke it down in a lot of different ways. Obviously, I talked about the biology and how the fetus actually develops, the stages of development, when you can determine the gender, when the baby is considered viable using our, top-notch techniques, and then kind of breaking it down from there. And so that's where we started getting into, well, why would somebody want to have an abortion? How would they go about doing the abortion if they did want it done? What are the techniques that the clinic would use to execute said abortion? And what are the risk factors for some of those techniques? And so I kind of discussed that just because so many people don't have a clue. And honestly, I didn't know about a lot of this stuff too. So I learned a lot just preparing for the presentation. But I don't know, I guess one of the main concerns that I got from the attendees was just how many of them really didn't understand how safe and effective abortion techniques are. They kind of seem to have it in their mind that this is an incredibly dangerous process. You're probably going to end up being sterile afterwards, or have significant problems with future pregnancies, how you have a much higher chance of dying from abortion than you do just going through with having the kid. And the fact of the matter is that you're 14 times more likely to die from having the kid than you are from an abortion.
Wow.
That's a huge factor. And when I put up the numbers just from 2011, people kind of just dropped their jaws. They really had no idea. Only 2 people died from abortions in 2011. 700 people died from having a baby.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty remarkable, actually.
That's a great example of having facts before you start to philosophize.
Yeah.
I like that because I don't really know anything about it either.
Deaths by snakes in the U.S. are incredibly low. And seeing that deaths from abortions are even lower than snakes, and snakes, you only have about 6 deaths per year from snakes. And to see abortions be even lower than that, that's just astounding to me. So
yeah, but it's funny, a lot of the, you mentioned how many laws have been passed in the last few years to restrict abortions. In many states, they've tried to upgrade abortion or clinics that provide abortions to basically like full-blown hospital conditions, and that's just not warranted by the evidence that you have just brought up. I mean, if you listen to some of those politicians asking for that, you would think that women are dying from that left and right.
And just to put things in perspective, the last year that we have data from, I think that was 2012 maybe, there were 700,000 abortions performed in that year.
Wow,
700,000, and only a couple of them died.
That's way more than I thought.
Yeah. And yet that rate has been steadily decreasing for the past 13 years. Really? The rate for abortion has steadily decreased. So it was decreasing even before all this abortion legislation. Okay. So it's been on the decline in general anyway. Is the legislation nowadays prohibiting that even more? Probably.
Now, you're not counting as abortion, you're not counting like the morning after pill, right?
Oh yeah, that's included. Absolutely.
Oh, that is included. Okay.
Well, I guess I should clarify that that's assuming that we actually know. Sorry, there are two different versions. I guess the
Okay.
morning after pill does not count.
Okay.
The other drug-related means of abortion that's very much like the morning after pill. The makeup of the pill is very, very similar because basically it does the same thing. But the morning after pill really helps prevent implantation. We are talking about after implantation.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just
So
want to.
I'm sorry.
Sure
You're right. You're right. I'm not including the morning after pill. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So 700,000, that's not including the morning after.
Right.
So you're saying, like, if we didn't have abortions every year, we would have maybe an additional 500,000 people born every year?
Right.
Wow, that is a staggering number of people.
But like I said, all these things have been decreasing. Like they actually said that the percentage of abortions that are occurring nowadays are the lowest percent since 1973.
Wow.
To put things in perspective. So there is still a much higher percentage of people actually having births than abortions, and yet as a percentage of the population, there's still a much lower percent of the population that is going through with having abortion.
The interesting thing is that, or one of the interesting things in that whole debate is that a lot of times when you see politicians being against abortions and trying to do all this, they're also against preventing pregnancies and basically every conceivable method of preventing pregnancies. A lot of those politicians are against. Pills, the devices that are inserted permanently, condoms, all those different things. They try to block every means for educating kids on the subject of sexual health, basically. The point where in a lot of places they teach kids abstinence only, and that's just not practical or reasonable or anything.
Yeah, and as far as my talk, I tried to avoid talking about contraceptives at all because that's a whole nother bag of worms entirely. But you're absolutely right. Some people just believe that we should be rabbits and just reproducing all the time. That we should not be, keeping our population down because it's not like we're destroying the planet anyway.
Of course.
But
when you don't believe in global warming, when you think that our resources are infinite, when you're a creationist thinking that the planet is 6,000 years old, I mean,
anything goes.
See why. You can see why someone would have these kind of views that we should be like rabbits and we should be fruitful and multiply, and then all that.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. D, are you saying that us moralless, ethicless heathens that we don't have anything holding us back, and yet we're trying to sit here and prevent destruction to the planet?
Yes. What amazes me is that you can't extrapolate that idea out even like 100 years. Like, are they incapable of even doing that? Like, let's just...
Hey, that's math and statistics, which is wizardry. All right. We don't we burn witches here in this town. All right.
Right. I'm sorry. I lost my faith there for a second. I'm back.
No, I mean, the crazy thing is, we know that, and especially for prevention, not so much abortion. Like, I think people are rightfully trying to decrease the number of abortions, but that should be done, in my opinion, through prevention as opposed to, other methods like criminalizing abortion or anything like that. But we know that sooner or later, there will be too many people on the planet. That if we continue the way we're continuing it, I don't know if it's a 50-year, 100-year outlook, but there will be too many people. We will not be able to produce sufficient quantities of food. Or, disease will develop where, it'll be hard to fight because the population will be so dense and all kinds of stuff like that. And all right, we're back. Sorry for my call, dropping out again. The point that I was trying to make was that we have to somehow address population growth. and it shouldn't be done through abortion by no means. It should be done through prevention, and we should provide women with the tools to control the reproductive cycle. I think, in my opinion, part of the reason why the number of abortions is so high is because we have failed to provide those tools to women.
One thing that was kind of interesting, if I can just briefly interject here, was that during my talk, I like I said, I tried not to talk about contraception at all. But during the questions at the very end of my talk, one of the attendees happened to be the women's studies professor, who I've seen a few different talks related to campus and even at some of the FreeThought talks, I think. And she made sure to bring up the fact that around half of all women seeking abortion were actually using some sort of contraceptive measure that failed.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty remarkable. I didn't think the
Wow.
percentage was that high. I guess I should have looked that up beforehand and talked about it briefly in my talk. But I mean, that's showing you that, women are trying. It's just we need better techniques. And I think part of that comes down to, I mean, I know what you were trying to go on to here, V, as far as talking about women needing better access to stuff and better techniques. And I completely agree. But honestly, this whole thing needs to be targeted at the source. And the source is men.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Interesting.
I really think that we need to be working more on male contraceptives, since that's really the number one problem. Women have enough problems to deal with, with that whole monthly thing. They have enough things to deal with. And I think that men need to start sharing the load here, beyond just providing a condom, which is great. It's just that it still needs to get at the source, and the source is the sperm. And we need to kill the sperm where they reside, or somehow otherwise disable them, so that once they leave the male, they are effectively neutralized. And so I really think that we need to start focusing more efforts on that, because if we can just destroy the sperm at the source, then we don't have to worry about anything downstream.
We could start a get a vasectomy movement, banners, some sort of cool name.
Absolutely.
Get a V. There you go. Bumper stickers all over the place.
Wasn't there? Weren't they working on a male pill? I thought they were, and it was pretty close to being released, if not already. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that's the thing, is that we don't get to hear about that stuff much. It doesn't seem like some of these politicians and other people are terribly enthused about the idea of having males do something. How dare we be responsible, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's other methods for contraception for women that are also not talked about much. At least, I mean, maybe because I'm a guy, I haven't looked it up so much. But there's some semi-permanent method where there's a small implant that gets put inside a woman, and it is supposedly even more effective than the pill.
The IUD.
Yes.
Intrauterine device.
Yes, that's what the official name is. And it's a little more costly, but if you know that you don't want to have any kids over the next, 6 months, a year, however long this device lasts, it's supposed to be competitive on price as well. You just have to, go over that upfront cost, I guess.
Is there like some sort of surgical installation?
No, it's not surgical. They just put it in you, is what I understand. Just really deep.
Huh. Interesting.
So it's not cutting into you. It's just inserting a device which will help prevent pregnancy.
It's interesting.
And it is a prevention, because a lot of people, on the religious side of things are worried about abortions, and they think that conflicts with their religion. But, so in some cases, those preventive methods are a little more accepted because there never was a pregnancy to begin with that needs to be aborted. So, in that sense, I think at least for some religious people, those type of devices are acceptable.
Yeah.
Where abortion may not be. That is.
Yeah. I don't know of anything that actually encourages abortion outside of those drugs, like the morning after pill, that are much stronger and much more designed for after implantation, or the surgical techniques, including vacuum aspiration. There's not really anything else that encourages abortion per se, unless you smoke and drink and undergo violent physical activity and take drugs. That'll help encourage abortions too, but that's not smiled upon.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, do you have an opinion on I mean, there obviously has to be some date in the cycle of when a fertilized egg is implanted to when a baby is viable outside the womb. There has to be some, in my opinion, some point of time before which it's legal to have an abortion, beyond which it's not legal to have an abortion. Like, do you have an opinion on that, having done some research?
right, and that was a very interesting point. I didn't try to delve into that too much because, like I said, I tried to avoid ethics and philosophy and morals in my talk. But what I did say was that the earliest that we can take a fetus out, assuming perfect, outstanding conditions, is 22 weeks.
Okay.
A fetus is considered about ready to go in just about every way by 36 weeks. So you're taking a fetus out basically at the 2/3 point. And that's really the earliest we can go. Even with more advanced techniques in the future, the only way that we're going to get earlier than that gets at what we consider to be viable. So right now, it's considered to be viable at that stage because we can basically take the baby, we can help it breathe, we can give it some nutrients, it'll process those nutrients successfully, and we don't need the umbilical cord. Before 22 weeks, you need the umbilical cord. You need a placenta. That baby cannot breathe on its own at all. So that's why the 22-week is pretty much a hard cutoff. We're never going to get past that unless we start developing some of these other methods, such as ectogenesis, which is basically getting at the notion that we can develop an artificial amniotic fluid type of environment with an artificial placenta, so to speak, that's in basically a cell culture kind of thing. And then at that point, once we perfect those techniques, which we've already been using on goat cells and goat embryos, once we perfect those techniques for humans, then viability is going to be a term that is just going to go out the window. Because by that point, every single point during the process, we can make a child viable, given those conditions.
Boy, that's
so it'd be
amazing.
almost like an egg incubator, but for humans.
The way that I pictured it was kind of like in the Matrix. If you've seen the Matrix, you saw these little pods that contained a growing embryo or a fetus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're picturing for the future.
And you say we're already doing that with goats?
Yeah.
Like how far can we take them? Can we take them all the way from fertilization to being a grown goat?
That was my understanding.
Yeah, that is phenomenal.
Wow.
I have not thought about that, but that is definitely coming.
So we're getting there. We're getting there.
That's
because as
unbelievable.
soon as we hit that point, this discussion won't even be a discussion anymore.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.